Hey there, welcome to my garage. This is my new garage. Just really got it finished setting up. It's a little workstation here. I added some lighting. Alright, this is actually an apartment garage, so it's pretty cool that this could even be in an apartment garage. Got a little heater because it gets to be about 20 degrees sometimes. Alright, we have my computer set up here. I'm lucky in this apartment complex they randomly assign garage spots. I seem to be the only one that has the garage spot directly under my apartment, so my Wi-Fi gets here nicely. It works out pretty well. What I wanted to show you today though was my newest project. Yeah, no, it's a Nintendo, except it's not. See those USB ports? That's our first sign that something's amiss here. And HDMI. What's going on? Let me show you. If you open up the inside, we have a Raspberry Pi. So what I made is a RetroPie, easy enough, but I made it function inside the Nintendo case. The biggest help right here though is these USB ports, which I just 3D printed the mount on. So I'm not going to go into the details of how to make the Raspberry Pi itself. I'm sorry, the RetroPie, because there's a million of those tutorials online. I had never done one before, and it took me about 30 minutes to get it. I don't imagine, if you want to build a RetroPie, that you could have any difficulty finding how to make one. The magic happens in the NES case. So these controller ports are fully functional USB, right? So all I did was I used 5 of the 7 or 8 wires, I forget how many it has, and I just rewired it to a USB cable. And you do have to be careful when you do that. USB can be sensitive. It's not like the most sensitive cable in the world, but you can introduce interference, so the less space you have between where your shielding starts and where the solder joints are, the better. If you have untwisted pairs go too long, they start to interfere and then you don't have any connectivity. Right, and then we have what I like also, the audio-visual ports, AV out on the Nintendo, are actually soldered to the AV jack for the Raspberry Pi. I only have this as headphones, so it's not actually mono and video, it's just right and left audio, because why would I use anything else than HDMI for the video? But I don't necessarily like to use HDMI for audio. The power brick, I depopulated every component other than the coax, the power actual input, and the switch. However, I'm going to depopulate the switch, or at least disconnect it electrically, because if the channel switch is changed, what ends up happening is it shorts out the power supply. So I just have it taped off for the time being. And then to further complicate things, I actually use the Nintendo's power reset and LED buttons. So I actually my first attempt was to just desolder the LED straight from the Raspberry Pi, the power indicator, straight from the Raspberry Pi, and then wire this LED there. I accidentally destroyed the pad for the solder point for the LED, so instead I just ended up using some of the 3.3 voltage from the GPID, or GPIO pins. Obviously that makes more sense. I don't know why I didn't think of it to begin with. I did the same thing for the power buttons. So the power just goes to ground, and then a 5-volt pin, and then the reset actually goes from a, the power switch comes from the 5 volts power, then into the 5 volts, and the power is also grounded straight to this without using the button, obviously, because it's just one path straight through, whereas the reset switch is 5-volt power and ground, because when you tap the reset switch, then it connects them, it shorts it out, and it turns it off momentarily, whereas the power button actually It stays on and off. So the trickiest part, actually, not to brag, but I'm pretty good at soldering, was the HDMI cable. Obviously, I had to have a male to female, which I didn't have on hand, and it was relatively short. Not a lot of things make it. Plus, it had to do this weird. I had to go through this tiny little hole that I drilled. It's one of the only modifications to the actual case I made. So I actually cut an HDMI cable and got a female HDMI connector and hand soldered every single connection. Obviously I had to look up the pinout on the HDMI. It wasn't too bad. And then I just used some Loctite tack pack, which is, insulated 2-part adhesive, which makes it nice and solid. I want to make sure these wires never ever ever move, because it could be hell if I had to try to take this out and resolder one. Well, I wouldn't, right? It would be done. That would be it. So I used the external connection port for the NES. Just drill a slight hole in there, have some slack, and it makes it damn near invisible to the outside. If I could figure out how to put it back in now with one hand. There. And it does work, so I was pretty pleased with myself after that. Here we have a USB wireless keyboard. I wasn't sure if Raspberry Pis could do that. Thankfully they can. I don't need a mouse, obviously, and so the 2 controller ports. And then what I did over here is I took a 4-port USB 2.0 hub, because I only had 1 port left, right? Because I have my 2 main controllers and my USB keyboard. So I took the 4-port thing. These come out of some motherboards we use at work. They're standard USB 2.0. They have the header on it, plug into the motherboard. So I just cut those and soldered each one into one of the ports of the USB hub. And then this goes into the last remaining USB port. I have some extra wire here that used to be a small Arduino. And I used to have some light shows in here. And not that I can see with the light, there's some buttons here that would control the LEDs. This was before NeoPixels existed, so I do plan on redoing this to create a nice little light show out of this vent. But I want to use NeoPixels. I was using just regular old LEDs that are RGB, and they get really hot. NeoPixels don't get hot. They get pretty bright, and obviously they can be controlled all over one pin of the Arduino. So I have an Arduino Nano ready for that. And so yeah, that was it. So I'm going to put the camera down for just a moment, and I'm going to put the top back on so we can see. Okay, so sorry about that. So here we go. The USB port's plugged into the last port on the Raspberry Pi. Alright, so from the outside, you would never know. It looks completely original NES until you open the door. I do have my games loaded on a low-profile USB drive, because if I wanted to add games on the SD card, it would be a pain in the ass to unscrew this and add it. So I have a low-profile USB card that I chose to use, as it is easily accessible from there. Unfortunately, I didn't actually bring to the garage the USB controllers that plug into there. So I'm just going to be using a regular old USB Nintendo controller, which, by the way, is what I used for these guys here. I just cut off the connector of a regular Nintendo controller, did the same thing you saw on the other side, and connected the USB one. However, I also would rather use the Super Nintendo controller for this currently. This is a load of Super Nintendo game. So I'm going to plug in the HDMI. Hard to do with one hand. And of course, Raspberry Pi is powered by USB. So what I did, I'll screw that in later, is I just cut off the USB tip soldered in the original Nintendo tip, right? And then it plugs into the original soldered brick that I depopulated. I just have the wires go straight to it from the power. Alright, so here we are. I have my computer set up, hooked up to the HDMI, and helps to plug in the power. Power strip is off. Okay. Ta-da! Look at that. So if I had these controllers, it would look absolutely fine. Normal. Original NES. And here we go, RetroPie. This was my favorite pre-made splash screen that I found, so I thought it was pretty cool. It has all the systems on there. And here we go, look at that. Fully functional RetroPie. This theme is killer. And there we go. Fully functional RetroPie hidden inside a Nintendo case.